Today, we are unpacking a topic that's really sparking a lot of debate. It's all about young people and their screens.
Hmm.
Specifically, we're looking at potential new government plans. Well, proposals, really, in the UK. They're aimed at limiting the time children spend on social media.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And our source for this deep dive is a BBC News article.
Mm,
It lays out these potential plans, but also, crucially, the reactions to them.
right.
So, our mission essentially is to dig into what's actually on the table or what might be, understand the government's thinking behind it.
Why now? Yeah.
Exactly. And then hear the criticisms, because there are some strong ones in the article, and the different viewpoints, and just see how this whole thing fits into the messy picture of online safety today.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, the source shows it goes beyond just putting a timer on things.
Totally.
It gets tangled up with these really fundamental questions about, how addictive is this tech? Where is the government's job stop and parental responsibility start? And what about the platforms themselves? Are they doing enough? Can they even do enough? It's definitely got layers, and this article gives us quite a few threads to pull on.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics then. What exactly is being talked about, according to the BBC article?
Well, the proposals are quite specific, apparently.
Yeah.
We're talking a potential 2-hour daily cap, but importantly, that's on individual social media apps.
Okay. Not total screen time, but per app.
Right. And possibly maybe even a 10 p.m. curfew for young users on these platforms.
Okay. So, concrete limits being floated. What's the reasoning? Why is the government considering this?
Well, according to the article, the technology secretary, Peter Kyle, he directly links it to concerns about the addictive nature of some of the apps and smartphones.
Right, that phrase comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the main driver. The perceived addictiveness is the problem they're trying to solve with these, potential time limits.
So, the government's framing is addiction is the issue. Time limits might be the tool. The article quotes Peter Kyle saying they've been trying to figure out what a healthy online life for children actually means.
Which is a huge question in itself.
It really is. And trying to stop the barriers that prevent kids from getting that balance. So it sounds like they see the sheer amount of time spent as one of those key barriers.
Now, we do need to put this into context, though, because this isn't coming out of nowhere.
No, definitely not.
There's already legislation, right? The previous government passed the Online Safety Act back in 2023.
Right. And this is where it gets a bit, complicated, isn't it? Because the article points out a big issue. That act, it's law, but it hasn't actually been fully rolled out yet.
Correct. It's not fully enacted.
And Peter Kyle, the technology secretary, is quoted saying that this delay has actually made it harder for him to even talk publicly about future ideas like these time limits.
Yeah, that delay is definitely a backdrop to all this. But even with the delays, parts of that 2023 Act are coming online soon. So by July, for example, platforms are going to be legally required to provide age appropriate material.
That sounds significant.
It is. And if they don't comply, they could face criminal sanctions. So Ofcom, the regulator, will eventually have some pretty serious enforcement powers from that existing act.
But okay, even with those powers coming, the article also brings up Peter Kyle's previous comments. He's apparently called the existing internet safety laws very uneven and unsatisfactory.
Right. He expressed frustration with the current act.
Yeah. So while the article mentions a Whitehall source, someone anonymous inside government saying there are no plans to scrap the act, it does feel like there's maybe a sense within government that the current framework isn't quite enough or isn't working fast enough, which might explain why they're looking at other things like these time limits.
And that whole situation, the delays, the frustrations, it naturally raises questions about whether time limits are even the right focus. And the article definitely includes some critical voices making that point.
Absolutely. A really powerful one mentioned is Ian Russell. He's an online safety campaigner, and his daughter, Molly Russell, tragically died after viewing harmful content online.
Yeah, his perspective, as the source reports it, is incredibly stark. He basically says that every single day of delay in getting tougher, more effective laws in place has meant more young lives lost and damaged.
Wow. He doesn't mince words.
No, he sees the real world consequences of not acting decisively.
And he's pretty blunt about these proposed time limits, too. Calls them sticking plasters.
Right. Like a temporary fix that doesn't address the underlying wound.
Exactly. His argument, he supported the idea behind the Online Safety Act, but he feels you need stronger and more effective laws to actually finally changed the dial on fundamentally unsafe products and business models that prioritize engagement over safety.
So it's not just about the delay for him, it's about the fundamental design of these platforms.
Yes. And the need for laws that tackle that, not just how long kids are using them.
And that idea focusing on the safety of the space itself, rather than just the time spent in it, that's echoed by another key figure in the article.
Who's that?
England's Children's Commissioner, Dame Rachel D'Souza.
Ah, yes. She calls for bolder action, right?
She does. Her reasoning, according to the source, is that technology is evolving at enormous pace. You just can't expect kids to police the online world themselves.
Yeah, that seems fair. The burden shouldn't really be on the child.
And she has this really powerful line in the article. It really cuts through the noise. She says, any amount of time online is too long if the content they see is harmful.
Oof. Yeah, that completely reframes it, doesn't it?
It really does.
Forget the clock. If what they're seeing is dangerous, then the duration is almost irrelevant.
Precisely. And her core argument follows from that. If companies can't guarantee safe spaces for children, then maybe they shouldn't be operating those spaces at all.
Strong stuff.
Yeah. She's urging the government and Ofcom to strengthen the laws so that essentially profit making by platforms cannot come at the expense of protection, which ties right back into Ian Russell's point about the business models.
So we've got this real tension here. The government is exploring time limits, possibly driven by addiction worries. But prominent campaigners, children's advocates, they're saying, hang on, the real problem is the harmful stuff, the unsafe design. Fix that.
Yeah, it's a fundamental difference in focus. And, amidst this debate about what new rules might be needed, the article also touches on the tools that are actually already out there for managing screen time.
Right, because there are quite a few, aren't there? Things like the parental controls built into operating systems by Apple and Google.
Exactly. They let parents set time limits, restrict content, set device curfews. Pretty granular controls are often available.
And some apps have their own features too. The article mentions TikTok introduced that default 60-minute limit for under 18s.
Though it also notes kids can just switch it off quite easily.
Ah, okay. And Instagram apparently prompts users, including adults, to set their own limits. Sort of a self-regulation nudge.
Yeah. But here's the catch, and it's a big one highlighted in the article.
What's that?
According to Sir Nick Clegg, who used to be a top executive at Meta.
Right, former deputy PM.
Yeah. He's cited saying that parental take-up of these existing tools is actually surprisingly low.
Really? So the tools are there, but parents aren't using them much.
Apparently not as much as you might expect. And the article hints at maybe one reason why. Some parents just find the sheer variety of tools across different apps and devices kind of overwhelming to manage.
Okay, that makes sense. Trying to juggle settings on TikTok, then Instagram, then the phone itself. It could be a lot.
It could.
Which again makes you wonder, if voluntary tools aren't getting wide use, how much would mandated government limits change things? Or what else needs to happen? Just adds another layer.
It certainly does. And speaking of layers and complexity, the article also brings in the international angle, which is a real practical challenge for the UK government here.
How so?
Well, the simple fact is that the vast majority of these big tech companies they're trying to regulate, they're based in the US.
Right, so jurisdiction issues.
Exactly. And the source notes this has caused friction before. Like the Trump administration was apparently very critical of other countries trying to regulate American tech firms.
Okay, so potential diplomatic or trade tensions if the UK pushes too hard.
It's a factor they likely have to consider. It shows that regulating this stuff isn't just about UK law, it bumps up against international relations too.
Does the article give any examples of other countries trying similar things?
It gives one very strong counterexample, China.
Ah, okay. What did they do?
Back in 2021, they brought in extremely strict limits on online gaming for minors.
How strict?
Really strict. Under 18s were limited to just 1 hour per day and only on Fridays, weekends, and public holidays.
Wow, that's it. Just 3 hours a week, essentially. Maybe a bit more on holidays.
Pretty much. The stated reason was concern about excessive gaming, and this actually replaced slightly less strict rules they had before.
So, a government really stepping in with a heavy hand based on similar concerns about screen time, just focused on gaming there.
Yes, a very direct top-down approach, although the article adds an interesting little coda to that.
Oh.
China was apparently looking at even more restrictions, things like limiting in-game spending for minors, but the draft rules for those changes, they just sort of disappeared from the government website last year.
Huh. So even in China, maybe implementing or tightening these things isn't always straightforward.
Seems like it. There are complexities everywhere, even with very different political systems.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together from the source material.
Hmm.
We've got the UK government exploring these potential time limits, 2 hours per app, maybe a 10 p.m. curfew, driven by worries about addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the backdrop of the existing Online Safety Act, passed but delayed, and maybe seen as unsatisfactory by the current tech secretary.
Right, leading to the search for additional measures.
But then you have the really strong pushback from campaigners like Ian Russell and the Children's Commissioner, Dame Rachel D'Souza. They're arguing, quite forcefully, that the focus should be on the content, on the safety of the platforms themselves, not just the time spent, calling time limits sticking plasters.
Yeah, demanding fundamental changes to the products and business models.
And we also heard about the tools that already exist, the parental controls, but the challenge that parents maybe aren't using them widely or find them overwhelming.
Plus, the whole international dimension regulating US companies, and the contrasting example of China's very strict approach.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? The BBC article shows a government wrestling with a super complex problem, different ideas about how best to protect kids.
Yeah, balancing regulation, platform responsibility, parental roles, all within this global tech landscape that's constantly shifting.
Exactly. And maybe that brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, based on everything we've unpacked from the source today. Given that powerful argument we heard that harmful content is the core issue, and time limits might just be those sticking plasters, what does this whole debate about how long children are online really tell us about finding a truly healthy online life for them? Is the most critical question about the duration of their screen time? Or is it fundamentally about the safety, the quality, the very nature of the digital world they step into the moment they log on?
Something to think about.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the potential new online safety regulations in the UK.